When William Hill thought he'd found his perfect Filipina bride through late-night video calls and promises of forever, he never imagined the romantic paradise would become his worst nightmare. But Helen's devastating secret would shatter everything he believed about love, trust, and the dangerous game being played with his heart across 2 continents. William Hill's fingers shook as he stared at the glowing computer screen in his dark Seattle apartment. The rain outside matched the tears he'd been holding back for weeks. Another woman had blocked him on the dating app. Another night alone with nothing but instant noodles and broken dreams. Then her message appeared like magic. "Hi, William. Your smile looks so kind. I think you have a good heart." The words came from someone named Helen. Her profile photo showed a beautiful Filipino woman with long black hair and eyes that seemed to look right through the screen into his soul. William's heart started beating faster than it had in months. He clicked on her profile. Helen Acosta, 24 years old, from Quezon City in the Philippines. She worked at a small bakery and helped take care of her sick mother. The photos showed her laughing with family, holding a small child, standing in front of a simple house that looked nothing like the fancy apartments the American women always demanded. William typed back quickly, "Thank you. You have a beautiful smile, too." Her reply came within minutes. "I don't usually message men first, but something about your eyes made me want to know you better." They started chatting every day. Helen would message him during her lunch breaks at the bakery. She told him about her life in the Philippines, how she woke up at 5 every morning to help her mother before work, how she saved every peso to help her younger brother finish school, how she dreamed of traveling but never had enough money. "I'm not like other girls you probably meet," Helen typed one evening. "I don't care about expensive things. I just want someone who will treat me with respect and love." William felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. The women in Seattle always wanted men with perfect jobs, perfect cars, perfect everything. Helen seemed different. She asked about his work as an engineer, but also wanted to know about his childhood, his dreams, his fears. After 2 weeks of messages, Helen suggested a video call. William spent an hour getting ready, changing shirts 3 times and practicing what to say. When her face appeared on his screen, he almost couldn't breathe. She was even more beautiful than her photos. Golden sunlight came through a window behind her, making her skin glow like honey. She wore a simple white dress and had her hair pulled back in a way that made her look innocent and pure. "Hi, William," she said softly. Her accent made his name sound like music. They talked for 3 hours that first call. Helen showed him around her small house through the camera. He met her mother, who smiled and waved even though she didn't speak English. Her younger brother Jake appeared in the background, shy but friendly. "My family likes you already," Helen laughed. "My mother says you have honest eyes." Every night after that, they would video chat for hours. Helen would tell him stories about growing up poor but happy in the Philippines. She described the smell of her mother's cooking, the sound of roosters waking her up each morning, the way rain sounded different on their metal roof. "I've never talked to someone like this before," Helen admitted during their second week of calls. "American men usually just want other things. You actually listen to me." William found himself falling harder each day. Helen never asked for money like he'd heard other Filipino women did. She never complained about her life or hinted that he should help her. She just seemed genuinely interested in getting to know him. "Would you ever want to visit the Philippines?" she asked one evening, her voice quieter than usual. "I've been thinking about it," William admitted. Would you want to meet in person?" Helen's face lit up with a smile that made his chest feel tight. "Really? You would come all the way here just to meet me?" "Helen, I think I'm falling in love with you," William said before he could stop himself. The words hung in the air between them across thousands of miles. For a moment, Helen just stared at him through the screen. Then her eyes filled with tears. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered. That night, William couldn't sleep. He walked around his apartment, looking at his empty rooms and imagining what it would be like to share them with someone like Helen. Someone who would cook him real meals and laugh at his jokes and actually want to be with him. The next morning, he called his travel agent. "I need a flight to Manila," he said, "as soon as possible." 2 days later, William was at the airport with a suitcase full of gifts for Helen and her family. His hands were sweating as he checked in for the longest flight of his life. He'd never traveled this far for anyone before. As the plane lifted off from Seattle, William pressed his face to the window and watched his old life shrink below the clouds. In 18 hours, he would meet the woman who might change everything. But as the airplane climbed higher into the dark sky, William's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ask her about David from Texas. The heat hit William like a thick blanket when he stepped off the plane in Manila. Sweat immediately soaked his shirt as he walked through the crowded airport, searching the sea of faces for the woman who had captured his heart through a computer screen. Then he saw her. Helen stood near the arrival gate, holding a small sign with his name written in colorful letters. She looked exactly like her photos, but somehow more real, more beautiful. Her sundress moved gently in the airport's air conditioning, and when she spotted him, her face broke into the same smile that had made him fall in love. "William," she called out, running toward him. When she hugged him, she felt small and warm in his arms. She smelled like flowers and something sweet he couldn't identify. For the first time in months, William felt like he was exactly where he belonged. "You're really here," Helen said, looking up at him with tears in her eyes. "I can't believe you came all this way for me." The ride to her family's house took them through busy streets filled with jeepneys, motorcycles, and vendors selling everything from fresh fruit to cell phone cases. Helen sat close to him in the taxi, pointing out landmarks and chattering excitedly about all the places she wanted to show him. "That's where I buy groceries for my mother," she said, pointing to a small market. "And over there's the church where I pray every Sunday." Her neighborhood surprised him. The houses were small and close together, with laundry hanging between windows and children playing in narrow streets. It wasn't poor exactly, but it definitely wasn't rich either. Helen's house was painted bright blue with a small garden in front where her mother grew vegetables. "Mama," Helen called as they walked up to the front door. "He's here." Luz, Helen's mother, came out to meet them. She was a tiny woman with graying hair and kind eyes. She spoke to William in broken English, welcoming him to their home and thanking him for coming so far to meet her daughter. "She talks about you every day," Luz said with a knowing smile. "William this, William that. I think she loves you very much." Jake, Helen's younger brother, was 17 and spoke much better English. He shook William's hand firmly and helped carry his luggage inside. "Helen never brings anyone home," Jake said quietly when his sister wasn't listening. "You must be really special." The house was small but clean and comfortable. Family photos covered every wall, showing birthdays, graduations, and holidays stretching back years. William noticed how happy everyone looked in the pictures, even though they clearly didn't have much money. That first evening, Helen's mother cooked a feast of Filipino dishes William had never tried before. They ate by candlelight because the electricity was out in their neighborhood, something Helen said happened often but didn't seem to bother anyone. "In America, people probably get very angry when the power goes out," Helen said, laughing. "Here, we just light candles and tell stories." Over the next few days, Helen showed William her world. They visited the bakery where she worked, a tiny shop that smelled like fresh bread and sugar. Her boss, an elderly Filipino man, seemed genuinely fond of Helen and treated her more like a daughter than an employee. "She's a good girl," he told William in English. "Works very hard, never complains. You're lucky to have her attention." They spent afternoons at hidden beaches an hour outside the city, where they were often the only people in sight. Helen taught William how to crack open coconuts and eat fresh fish grilled over an open fire. She laughed when he struggled with chopsticks and patiently showed him how to eat with his hands the way locals did. "You're trying so hard to fit in," she said one evening as they walked along the shore. "But I like you just the way you are." At night, they would sit on her family's small porch, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood settling down for sleep. Children calling to each other from nearby houses, dogs barking in the distance, the occasional motorcycle puttering past. Helen would curl up next to William and tell him stories about growing up in this place. "When I was little, I used to dream about leaving here," she said one night. "I thought I needed to go somewhere else to be happy. But now, with you here, I think maybe happiness isn't about the place. Maybe it's about the person you're with. William felt his heart swell with love for this woman who seemed to find joy in simple things. Back in Seattle, he dated women who complained about expensive restaurants not being good enough. Helen got excited about sharing a mango they'd bought from a street vendor. "I've never felt this way about anyone," William told her as they sat watching the stars. "You make everything feel possible." Helen looked at him with tears shining in her eyes. "Promise me something," she said. "Anything. Promise me you won't change your mind about me. Promise me this isn't just a vacation feeling that will go away when you get home." William took her hands in his. They were rough from work, but warm and real. "Helen, I want to marry you. I want to bring you to America and give you the life you deserve." She started crying then, happy tears that made him want to protect her from every sadness she'd ever known. But that night, as William lay on the small bed in Jake's room, Jake had insisted on sleeping on the couch so William could have privacy. His phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. "Check Global Connections Incorporated Manila office. Asked about client number 247. William stared at the message in the darkness, his heart suddenly racing for all the wrong reasons. What was Global Connections Incorporated? And why did someone keep sending him these cryptic warnings? Outside his window, Manila hummed with late-night life, but William couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The woman sleeping in the next room felt like a dream come true, but dreams he was starting to remember had a way of turning into nightmares when you least expected it. William's hands trembled as he typed the words "Global Connections, Inc. Manila" into the computer at a busy internet cafe. The air conditioning barely worked, and sweat dripped onto the sticky keyboard as dozens of other people chatted loudly around him in languages he couldn't understand. What he found made his blood turn to ice. Page after page of angry forum posts from American men. Stories of broken hearts and empty bank accounts. Photos of smiling Filipino women who all looked somehow similar, young, beautiful, and holding signs with different men's names. "She took everything I had," wrote someone called Mike from Ohio. $15,000 and 2 years of my life. Found out she was talking to 6 other guys the whole time. William scrolled faster, his heart pounding. Then he saw it, a photo that made him feel sick to his stomach. Helen's face smiling next to a man who wasn't him. The caption read, "Helen A., professional romance specialist, Quezon City operations." His vision blurred as he read the comments below. Men warning each other about the same woman who had whispered, "I love you," to him just hours before. The same woman who had cried when he promised to marry her. William stumbled out of the internet cafe into the blazing afternoon heat. Manila's streets seemed different now. Louder, more dangerous, full of people who might be lying about everything. He needed to know the truth, but first he had to see where Helen really went during the day. The next morning, William told Helen he wanted to explore the city alone. "Just guy stuff," he said, forcing a smile that felt like broken glass. "Maybe buy some souvenirs for friends back home." Helen kissed his cheek and said she had to work at the bakery anyway. But instead of following her to the small bread shop where she'd taken him before, William stayed hidden across the street and watched where she actually went. She walked for 20 minutes through busy streets, past the bakery completely, until she reached a tall glass building in the business district. William followed at a distance, his heart breaking with every step. The building was nothing like the simple neighborhood where Helen claimed to work. Men in expensive suits walked in and out of the lobby. Security guards checked IDs at the entrance. A sign by the front door read, "Global Connections, Inc., International Romance Solutions." William felt like he was drowning in broad daylight. Through the glass windows on the 3rd floor, he could see rows of desks with computers and headsets. Young women sat at each station, talking animatedly into their microphones. He recognized some of their faces from the internet forum photos. And there was Helen. She wore different clothes than she'd put on that morning. A professional business outfit instead of the simple dress she'd shown him. Her hair was styled differently too, more glamorous. She looked like she belonged in this world of polished lies. William watched her laugh at something on her computer screen. She was probably talking to another lonely man in another country, telling him the same sweet words she'd whispered to William in the darkness of her family's home. That evening, Helen came home acting exactly the same as always. She hugged him tightly and asked about his day exploring the city. She helped her mother cook dinner and played with the neighborhood children who always gathered around their house after school. "You seem quiet tonight," she said as they sat on the porch after dinner. "Did something happen today?" William looked at her face in the dim light from inside the house. She looked genuinely concerned, exactly like the woman he'd fallen in love with through video calls. How could someone lie so perfectly? "Just tired from walking around in the heat," he said. Helen moved closer and took his hand. "Poor baby. Tomorrow I'll take you somewhere cooler. Maybe we can go to the mountains where my cousin lives." The way she said, "poor baby," made William's stomach turn. How many other men had she called by the same pet name? That night, William lay awake staring at the ceiling while Jake slept peacefully on the couch in the next room. Through the thin walls, he could hear Helen moving around in her room, probably getting ready for another day of professional deception. His phone buzzed with another mysterious message. "Building 2, 3rd floor, desk 47. She's there every weekday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Client files kept in locked drawer." William typed back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. "Someone who cares about the truth. Check her desk tomorrow during lunch break. Security code is 2847. William deleted the messages and tried to sleep, but his mind raced with questions. Who was sending him this information? How did they know so much about Helen's work? And most importantly, was any part of what he'd experienced with Helen real? The next day felt like the longest of William's life. He pretended to be sick so he wouldn't have to leave the house with Helen. Luz fussed over him, bringing him soup and checking his temperature like a real mother would. "Helen, very worried about you," Luz said in her broken English. "She loved you very much. I see it in her eyes." Was Luz part of the lie too? Or was she an innocent victim of her own daughter's deception? At noon, when William knew Helen would be at lunch, he took a taxi back to the Global Connections building. His hands shook as he approached the security guard. "I'm here to see Helen Acosta," he said. "She forgot her medication." The guard looked bored and barely glanced at William's foreign face before waving him through. Apparently, American men visited this building often enough that it wasn't unusual. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt like descending into hell. The doors opened to reveal the romance factory he'd glimpsed from the street. Dozens of women creating fake love for lonely men around the world. Desk 47 was easy to find. Helen's nameplate sat next to a computer still logged into multiple chat windows. William could see conversations with men named Robert, David, and Michael. Each chat window showed the same loving messages Helen had sent to him, copied and pasted to different victims. "I think about you every day," she'd written to Robert. "You make me feel safe," she told David. "I've never felt this way about anyone before," she'd promised Michael. The exact same words she'd whispered to William in the darkness of her family's porch. William's knees went weak as he opened the locked drawer with the security code from the mysterious messages. Inside were client files organized by country and income level. His own file was marked Priority Client, High Value Target. The notes inside made him feel sick. Subject response, well, to family involvement. Mother and brother very effective in building trust. Recommend extending courtship phase to maximum 6 weeks before pushing for marriage commitment. Financial capacity estimated at $80,000 to $120,000 based on job description and living situation. There were photos of him from his own social media accounts, printed out and analyzed. Someone had circled his posts about feeling lonely and written emotional vulnerability. Exploit this in red ink. William heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly shoved everything back into the drawer. He made it to the elevator just as a group of employees returned from lunch, their laughter echoing off the walls like the sound of his heart breaking. William stood in the lobby of Global Connections, Inc. the next morning, watching Helen walk through the front doors like she owned the place. Gone was the simple girl from a neighborhood who worried about her sick mother and dreamed of a better life. In her place stood a professional con artist in a business suit, carrying herself with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how to break hearts for money. He followed her into the elevator. William, Helen's face went white when she saw him. What are you doing here? I thought you were still sick. We need to talk, William said quietly. The elevator filled with other employees who looked at William with recognition. He realized they probably all knew about him, the lonely American engineer who'd fallen for their colleague's performance. When the doors opened on the third floor, William walked straight to Helen's desk. The office fell silent as dozens of romance specialists stopped their conversations with victims around the world to watch the drama unfold. Sit down, William said. Helen's hands shook as she sat at her workstation. The computer screen still showed her active chats with other men, their loving messages frozen mid-conversation like evidence in a courtroom. How many of us are there? William asked loud enough for the whole office to hear. Helen looked around desperately, probably hoping her supervisor would rescue her. But everyone just stared, waiting to see how she would handle getting caught. William, I can explain, Dash. How many men are you talking to right now? He interrupted. How many are sending you money? How many think they're going to marry you? Helen's professional mask finally cracked. Tears started running down her cheeks, but William couldn't tell if they were real or just another tool in her arsenal. 7, she whispered. 7 active clients. The number hit William like a physical blow. 7 men were living the same fantasy he'd been living. 7 men were planning futures with a woman who was planning to destroy them. How long have you been doing this? William asked. 3 years, Helen said, her voice barely audible. Since I graduated from college. William looked around the office at all the other women doing the same thing. Some looked ashamed now that their work was being exposed. Others seemed annoyed that their day had been interrupted by inconvenient emotions. This is your real job, William said. It wasn't a question. Helen nodded, unable to meet his eyes. The bakery? I volunteer there sometimes. On weekends. Your sick mother? She has diabetes, but it's not that serious. We use it for sympathy. Each life felt like another knife in William's chest. Your brother's school fees? Jake's on a scholarship. He's actually really smart. William laughed bitterly. So what part of it was real? Any of it. Helen looked up then, and something in her eyes looked different. Not the practiced vulnerability he'd seen before, but something rawer. The feelings, she said desperately. The feelings were real. Which feelings? The ones you have for me, or for Robert, or for David, or for Michael? Helen's face showed genuine surprise. How do you know about Dash? I know about all of them, William said. I know this whole thing is a business. I know you have a quota to meet and bonuses to earn. I know I'm just client number 247. That's not true, Helen said, standing up suddenly. Yes, this started as work. Yes, I was assigned to you. But somewhere along the way, it became real for me. I wasn't supposed to fall in love with you, but I did. Love. William's voice got louder. You call this love? Lying to me about everything? Taking my money? Making me think I was special while you were doing the same thing with 6 other guys. I never asked you for money. Helen shot back. That's not how I work. I'm not like the others here. A woman at a nearby desk snorted with laughter. Please, Helen, you're exactly like the rest of us. You just think you're better because you don't ask for cash directly. Helen spun around to face her coworker. Shut up, Maria. You don't know anything about my situation. I know you've been planning to get pregnant by one of your clients, Maria said coldly. I heard you talking about it with your supervisor. Anchor baby strategy, right? Guarantee your visa to America? William felt the room spinning around him. Pregnant? Helen's face went even whiter. That's not. I never. Oh, please, said another woman from across the room. We all heard you asking about fertility timing. You were going to trap him the same way you trapped that guy from Germany last year. There was no guy from Germany. Helen shouted. His name was Klaus. Maria said matter-of-factly. You got his visa petition approved and then dumped him for someone with more money. Just like you're planning to do with this one. William looked at Helen, searching her face for denial, for explanation, for anything that might salvage some piece of truth from the wreckage of their relationship. Instead, he saw guilt. William, Helen said quietly, it's not what you think. Then what is it? William asked. Explain it to me. Explain how any of this is different from what they're saying. Helen opened her mouth, but no words came out. Around them, the office had gone completely silent. Even the phone calls to other victims had stopped as everyone watched Helen's carefully constructed world fall apart. "I love you," she finally whispered. "That's the only thing that matters." William felt something break inside his chest. Not his heart, because that had been broken since yesterday. Something deeper. His ability to trust his own judgment. His faith in his worth as a person. "No," he said quietly. "The only thing that matters is that you chose to lie to me about everything. You chose to make me fall in love with someone who doesn't exist." William turned and walked toward the elevator, leaving Helen crying at her desk, surrounded by the tools of her trade. As the doors closed, he heard her calling his name, but he didn't turn around. The man who stepped into that elevator was different from the one who'd arrived in Manila 3 weeks earlier. He'd learned something valuable, but painful. Sometimes the only way to save yourself is to walk away from everything you thought you wanted. But as the elevator descended toward the lobby, William's phone buzzed with one final message from the mysterious number. "There's more you need to know. Meet me at Rizal Park, main entrance, 6 p.m. Come alone." The departure lounge at Ninoy Aquino International Airport hummed with the quiet energy of endings and beginnings. William Hill sat in a plastic chair that had seen thousands of other departures, watching planes taxi across the tarmac through rain-streaked windows. His boarding pass read Seattle in bold letters, but the destination felt less like going home and more like starting over. 3 days had passed since he'd walked out of Global Connections Incorporated. 3 days of sitting in his hotel room, staring at his phone as it buzzed constantly with messages from Helen. Apologies that shifted between desperate and angry. Explanations that contradicted each other. Promises that felt as empty as the suitcase he'd packed with gifts he would never give. He'd finally turned the phone off yesterday. The mysterious meeting at Rizal Park had answered his remaining questions, though not in ways he'd expected. The person who'd been sending him warnings turned out to be a woman named Sandra, an American who'd married a Filipino man through a legitimate agency years before. She'd made it her mission to expose operations like Global Connections after watching too many friends get destroyed by elaborate deceptions. "They study you," Sandra had explained as they sat on a park bench, surrounded by families enjoying Sunday evening together. "They learn what makes you vulnerable, what you're missing in your life, and they become exactly that missing piece. It's not personal, it's just business." William had asked her why she'd chosen to help him specifically. "Because you seemed like a good man," she'd said simply. "Good men don't deserve to have their hearts turned into profit margins." Now, waiting for his flight, William reflected on how strange it felt to be grateful for having his illusion shattered. The man who'd arrived in Manila 3 weeks ago had been desperate for validation, willing to cross oceans for someone who claimed to see his worth. The man preparing to leave understood that his worth had never been in question, only his willingness to recognize it himself. His phone buzzed back to life as he prepared to board. One final message from Helen. "I know you'll never forgive me, but I need you to know, when I said I loved you, that wasn't part of the job. That was real." William read the words twice, then deleted the message without responding. Real or not, her feelings couldn't repair the foundation of lies beneath them. Love built on deception wasn't love at all. It was just another kind of transaction. The flight to Seattle gave him 14 hours to think about the man he'd been and the man he was becoming. Somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, as most passengers slept and flight attendants moved quietly through darkened aisles, William realized he wasn't angry anymore. The rage that had sustained him through the confrontation had burned itself out, leaving behind something more valuable: clarity. He'd gone to the Philippines searching for someone to complete him, but completion wasn't something another person could provide. It was work he had to do himself. 1 year later, William returned to Manila. Not for love, not for closure, but for a conference his engineering firm was hosting at a hotel in Makati. As his taxi wound through familiar streets, he noticed details he'd missed during his first visit. The way vendors smiled genuinely at regular customers. How families gathered on stoops in the evening to share food and stories. The simple contentment that had nothing to do with romance or rescue fantasies. He'd changed in the months since leaving. Not dramatically. No complete personality overhaul or dramatic lifestyle shifts. Just small, important adjustments. He'd started saying no to social situations that made him feel desperate for approval. He'd begun treating himself with the same kindness he'd always shown others. He'd learned to enjoy his own company without seeing solitude as evidence of failure. There have been dates back in Seattle. A few promising connections with women who appreciated his thoughtfulness without trying to exploit it. Nothing serious yet, but William no longer felt the crushing urgency to couple up that had driven him across the world before. Relationships, he learned, worked better when you entered them as a complete person rather than someone seeking completion. On his last day in Manila, curiosity led him back to Quezon City. Global Connections Incorporated had indeed closed down, as Sandra had predicted it would. Too many complaints, too much negative publicity. The building now housed a legitimate call center that helped American companies with customer service. He found Helen working at a small cafe not far from her family's house. When she looked up from wiping down tables and saw him standing in the doorway, her face cycled through emotions he recognized: surprise, hope, fear, resignation. William. She said his name like a prayer or an apology. Hello, Helen. She looked older, more tired than he remembered. The polished professionalism was gone, replaced by the honest weariness of someone working a real job for honest pay. Her hands, he noticed, were stained with coffee and calloused in new places. Can we talk? She asked. William nodded and took a seat at a corner table. Helen poured him coffee without asking what he wanted. She still remembered how he liked it. The small gesture reminded him that not everything between them had been fabricated. I heard the company closed, William said. 6 months ago. Helen sat across from him, her own cup untouched. A lot of angry customers, a lot of complaints to the government. They shut us down and investigated everyone. What happened to the others? Maria and the rest. Some found other jobs. Some started their own operations in different cities. Helen's voice carried no judgment, just factual reporting. Some got married to their clients for real. And you? Helen gestured around the small cafe. It's honest work, even if it doesn't pay much. My family was disappointed when they learned what I'd really been doing. They thought I was just good at making foreign friends. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the cafe's background noise filling the space between them. Filipino pop music played softly from a radio behind the counter. A group of college students laughed over textbooks at a nearby table. Life continuing its ordinary course. I need you to know something, Helen said finally. Well, I told you at the end about falling in love with you. That was true. Everything else was work, but that was real. William studied her face, searching for deception out of habit, then realized it didn't matter anymore. Real or not, her feelings couldn't change what had happened between them. Truth and consequences existed separately from emotion. I believe you, he said, and meant it. But it doesn't change anything. Helen nodded as if she'd expected this response. I know. I just needed you to know. Why? William asked, genuinely curious. Because it changed me, Helen said quietly. Feeling something real in the middle of all those lies, it made me see what I was doing to people, what I was doing to myself. William reached across the table and touched her hand briefly, not with romantic intention, but with the recognition of shared damage and mutual healing. I'm sorry, Helen said, tears gathering in her eyes. For all of it. For making you think love was something you had to earn from someone like me. I'm sorry too, William replied, for needing to believe it so badly that I ignored the warning signs. As he prepared to leave, Helen walked him to the cafe's entrance. Manila moved around them in its eternal dance of cars and people and vendors and life. The city that had once seemed like a backdrop for his romantic dreams now felt simply like itself. A place where real people lived real lives, separate from any foreigner's fantasies. Will you be okay? William asked. Helen smiled, and for the first time since he'd known her, it looked completely natural. Yes. Will you? Yes. Walking away from the cafe, William felt lighter than he had in months. Not because he'd found closure or forgiveness, but because he'd stopped needing either one. The nightmare was over, not because it had been resolved, but because he'd chosen to wake up from it. His plane lifted off from Manila as the sun set over the bay, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that no photograph could capture. William watched the city lights fade below him and thought about the difference between fantasy and reality, between needing love and deserving it, between seeking validation and simply being valid. The man in the airplane window's reflection looked back at him with quiet confidence. Not the desperate hope he'd carried on his first journey, nor the bitter disappointment that had marked his departure. Just calm self-possession, the knowledge that he was enough, exactly as he was, without needing anyone else's approval to make it true. Some dreams, William understood now, were meant to be awakened from. The best ones were the ones you built while awake, with your eyes wide open and your heart protected by the boundaries you'd learned to draw around your own worth. Below, Manila continued its ancient rhythm, indifferent to the small human dramas played out within its borders. And above, William Hill flew toward a future he would build on solid ground, not on the shifting sands of someone else's performance, but on the bedrock of self-respect he'd finally learned to trust.